Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Code Along. My name is Reese, and I'll be your moderator today. We're going to kick off the session in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting so everyone has a chance to join. In the meanwhile, though, we'd love to hear from you. So let us know where you're joining from using the chat or the comments, depending on what platform you're watching on. And let us know what you'd like to get out of today's session. Today's Code Along will be hosted on DataCamp Workspace. So if you don't have a DataCamp account yet, make sure you sign up for one. And also make sure you get registered for the event as well. I've put a link to that in the chat and also on LinkedIn as well. So if you get registered, we'll send you the recording, we'll send you the resources, and we'll send you everything you possibly need. Brilliant. I think that's everything from me for the moment. So enjoy the background music for another couple of minutes, and I'll be back to repeat these messages for any new joiners. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's live Code Along. My name is Reese, and I'll be your moderator today. We're going to kick off the session in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting so everyone has a chance to join. Let us know where you're joining from as well, using the comments or the chat, depending on what platform you're watching on, and make sure that you've got a DataCamp Workspace account. Today's Code Along will be hosted on DataCamp Workspace. So make sure you sign up there. I would be posting a link shortly so you can code along with us. As well, don't forget to register for the event today, and we will send you the recording, the slides, resources, and everything else like that. Brilliant. I will be back to repeat these messages shortly, but until then, make sure you get registered and make sure you've got a DataCamp Workspace account and you're ready to code along with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Code Along today. Give me 1 second while I get all of our stuff ready and waiting, and I'll hide the little ticker below. So, as mentioned, welcome to the Code Along. Your instructor for the session today is Richie Cotton. Among other things, Richie is DataCamp's resident data and AI evangelist, and he's also the co-host of the Data Framed podcast. If you haven't already listened to the podcast, go listen to the podcast. Richie has been creating courses, content, and stunning fashion ensembles at DataCamp since 2016. So without further ado, over to you, Richie.
Thanks for the intro, Reese. All right, so hi there, data scamps and data champs. This is Richie. And well, I'm sure you all know that ChatGPT is the biggest tech hit of the year. Sometimes the chat interface isn't ideal. So if you are creating products with generative AI, or you're doing data science with generative AI, in general, you want to be writing code rather than using that web chat interface, because you want to be able to hook up those results to other pieces of analysis or other pieces of software. So today we're going to be using the OpenAI API. So we're going to be writing some Python code in order to get that GPT magic. And in addition to using GPT with the OpenAI API, we are also going to use that same API to access the Whisper model. So Whisper is OpenAI's speech-to-text model. So we're going to be getting a transcript of some audio. And those two things combined, it's called like multimodal analyses, because we're working with two different formats of data. So we've got the text data for GPT, and we've got the audio data for Whisper. So we're going to be playing around with that, pretty cutting edge. And also I've snuck in some LangChain code for you to work on today. So LangChain is a framework for developing applications with generative AI. So we're going to get started using that as well. I am going to do the shortest slideshow ever now. Reese, can you turn on my screen sharing, please? So we have exactly one slide to go through. We are not covering any data today at all. So no data sets, no data analysis, no data science, no nothing. I know it's very rare for Data Camp, but we're just going to be doing generating content. So the main goal is to learn how to use generative AI for multimodal data. So you can see a pretty useful sort of businessy example. And the secondary goal is just practicing using the OpenAI API. So we're going to see the GPT and Whisper APIs, and we're going to get started using LangChain. Why are we doing this? Well, generative AI just really is the biggest tech story of 2023. So this is all important stuff. Now, one thing to note, you are going to have to get set up with a developer account for OpenAI in order for any of this work, and you have to integrate that with Workspace. So here's a little description of what we're going to be doing today. For those of you who like spoilers, I'm going to talk you through how to get set up with the OpenAI developer account and how to integrate Workspace. The instructions are in a different notebook. So if you go to Files on the left-hand side and click on the Getting Started notebook, then you can see the instructions. So first thing you need to do is go to the API signup page. So I already have an account, but I'm not going to create one, but just work through. You can either use existing Google, Microsoft, or Apple IDs, or you can use your email address. You are going to be asked for a phone number as well for security purposes. So I'll give you a moment to do that. And then the next step is that you need to create an API key. So this is like it's a little bit like a password for software communication. So once you've created your account, sorry, I have to log in. There we go. You're going to go to this page, and all you have to do is create a new secret key, and you can give it a name to remember what it's about. I would have a key, so I'm not going to create a new one. I've just called it DC for Data Camp. So create one of those keys. And then the third thing you need to do is add a payment method. So just to note, running the code today does cost money. It's not particularly expensive. I've said it should cost less than 20 US cents. When I ran it, actually the most expensive bit is transcribing the audio file. That costs about 4 cents. And I think in total it was about 6 or 7 US cents to run the whole thing. If you run some of the code blocks multiple times, then you're going to get charged every time. So it might cost you a little bit more, but you're looking at a general cost of about 6 or 7 US cents in order to run today's training. And to do this, you want to go to the payment methods page. And you're going to have to add your credit card. So pretty straightforward. Just type in your credit card details and save the payment method. All right. The next thing is that you need to integrate this with Workspace. So in the left-hand navigation bar, there is an environment pane. And you're going to click on the Add Environment Variables Plus button. So just to the right of where it says Environment Variables, you can do plus. And I've included the name of the variable that you need. So it's going to be called OpenAI API key. And then the value, that's the thing that was generated in the OpenAI website. So I should probably have mentioned that when you did, where was it? This step, you're going to want to take a copy of the secret key that's generated. So when you click create secret key, it's going to show something, a series of letters and numbers on screen. You're going to need to take a copy of that and put it into your workspace. So I've got this set up already. And I've just realized here, it also talks about Pinecone API key. We're not going to need that today. But yeah, once you've got this OpenAI API key variable set up, you're going to need to connect. I'm already connected, so it tells me disconnect, but you need to make sure that you are connected and you've got a green dot to the left of it. All right, so I'm going to go back to Files and click on notebook.ipynb. If at any point you get stuck with something, then we do have the solution here in the notebook -solution workbook. Notebook, sorry. All right, so with that, let's get started writing some code. So the first thing you need to do, we don't have LangChain installed by default in Workspace because it's being developed so quickly and things change and break. So you're going to have to do pip install. I've fixed the version of this just to guarantee that the code works because, as I said, it's changing pretty rapidly. So the code's provided for you. All you need to do is click run on this cell. It should take about 10 seconds or so to install. The next thing is that LangChain actually depends on a very recent version of the typing extensions package. There is a slightly older version of Workspace, but we need to upgrade it. So you need to run this second cell in order to install the latest version of typing extensions. All right, so everything's installed. Now we can get into loading some of the packages that we need. So in order to chat with GPT, we need to load the OpenAI package. And we also need the OS package in order to set the API key from the environment variable we just created. So first thing, we're going to do import OS. And we're going to do import OpenAI. The next step is to set the API key. So this is a variable called OpenAI.API_key. And we're going to set this to os.environ. We use the tab autocompletion there. And we called it OpenAI API key. I'm going to run this cell now. So that's set us up, which means that now it's given us permission to access the OpenAI API. So next, we need to import the LangChain package. So LangChain is this big sprawling thing. So as well as importing the whole package, it's got many submodules. And just to save a bit of typing later on, we're going to import a few specific functions from those submodules. So we're going to do import LangChain as LC. And then in the next line, so from one of the submodules, we're going to be using the OpenAI chat functionality. So from langchain.chat modules, in fact, I'm just going to copy and paste this a little bit. Too much typing. We're going to import, so it's called chat OpenAI. And then we want 3 functions for different types of message. So similar bit of code here. So from langchain.schema, we're going to import these 3 things. Again, I'm going to do a copy and paste because I don't like typing. Right. And then finally, we have to import a chat prompt template. Okay, so this is all the rest of the inputs we need, and I'm going to run this. All right, so that's everything set up. The next step is to actually have a conversation with GPT. I just realized I can maximize this so you can see a little bit more of the screen. So we're going to send a message to GPT and we get a response back. So this is pretty much how all GPT interactions work. You send a message, that's your prompt, and you get a response back. So today we're going to be using GPT 3.5 Turbo. If you have access to GPT-4, you can use it. I don't think from a learning perspective there's much benefit to that. You might get slightly fancier responses, but we've focused a little bit more on the code than the precise text that's responded. If you want to do that, when we call chat OpenAI, you've got to pass model name equals GPT-4. The price is higher, so it's going to cost you a bit more money for those. So it'll cost you a few extra cents. Now, before we actually get writing code, I think it's worth talking about the different types of message. So there are 3 different kinds of message, and a system message is there to describe the behavior of the AI assistant. So essentially, GPT-4 is doing a sort of role play thing, and the system message describes how you want it to role play. So a good sort of default is you're a helpful assistant. It's pretty generic. It's not going to steer the conversation in any particular direction, except that it's going to try and give you good responses. A human message is what you want the AI assistant to say. So this is essentially, this is your prompt. And we're going to go over plenty of examples of this today. And then the AI message is something that was a previous response to the conversation. So it's what GPT says back to you. I'd also like to just talk a little bit about why we're using LangChain. So LangChain has been very controversial, at least in the data camp offices. So I've spoken to a lot of our developers who are working quite a lot with LangChain, and there are 2 main reasons why you'd want to use LangChain. So first of all, some of the code's a bit cleaner. So if you're using the OpenAI package directly, then when you get a response back, it's actually a real pain to just extract the text of the response. And so some of the LangChain code is a lot cleaner. It simplifies what you have to do. And secondly, it's designed to make it easy to swap out different AIs. So if you decide you don't want to use GPT, your company decides, okay, we're switching to something else, I don't know, Anthropic or Cohere or something like that, then it makes it really easy to swap over your code. So it makes your code a lot more portable. And this is quite useful in a corporate setting. I think it's less useful if it's just you as an individual working with this. But on a corporate level, if you've got a big software project, you want to make it easy to not tie yourself to one particular AI. So those are the good reasons for using LangChain. The bad reason is that LangChain comes from very much a software developer's perspective. So in particular, like people who do like low-level, like C++ type programming, they're very keen on creating lots of classes for everything. So precisely defining objects. And this is the opposite of how most data analysts and data scientists think. So most data-related programming uses very simple data structures. Like you have vectors and you have data frames, and the types of things that you deal with is like it's numbers, text, true or false, and that's more or less it for a lot of things. So data-related code is very simple and uses not very many classes for things. The software developer mindset is very different. And so I think LangChain is quite complex to understand for data use cases. So we're only going to do simple LangChain stuff today, and there are a few bits where I've decided to ignore LangChain and just go directly with the OpenAI package. So I'll talk you through my reasoning for those when we get to those particular steps. All right, so with that, let's write some more code. So the first thing we have to do is create a chat object So it's going to be a chat OpenAI object because that's the model we're using. I'm just going to assign it to a variable called chat. And the next thing, we're going to create a list of messages. So this is going to be our prompt. We're going to have a system message and then a human message. I'm going to assign it to a variable called messages. What is LLM? So just as a nice sort of opening test questions to make sure our code's working, it's quite nice to just ask something simple like, explain what a large language model is. All right, so we're going to create a list of things. So square brackets. And then our first message is, this is going to be a system message. And we're going to use the content argument. And I'm just going to copy and paste this from here. So we are telling GPT to role play as a machine learning expert who writes for an audience of 10-year-olds. So hopefully it's going to give us a relatively simple response, although there are some very smart 10-year-olds. So I don't know how simplified it's going to get. And then we're going to have a human message, which is going to be like the actual part of our question. So the system message is for like, how are you role playing? Human message is for what you actually want to ask it. So we're going to say, what is a large language model? And then, so we've got a list of messages. And then the next thing to do is to pass this message to GPT and get a response back. So I'm copying and pasting the name of the response variable. And to pass the message to GPT, this object we created, you act as though it's a function. So you're going to call chat, but with parentheses, and we're going to pass in this list of messages. Once we've done that, we're going to print the response variable so you can see what it's like. Now, the response variable is a sort of it's a slightly more complex object, and what we actually care about is the response's content. So we're also going to print response what is LLM.content, and you'll be able to see the difference. Okay, so I'm going to run this. It's going to take a few seconds to run because we're sending a question to GPT. It's not too bad. It's about 3 or 4 seconds. But yeah, that's passed things to GPT on the OpenAI servers and got a response back. And we can see the output in 2 forms. So this whole object, the response, what is LLM, that's shown here. And you can see it's basically a dictionary with a content element. So that's all that. And then it's also got an additional arguments, which we didn't pass any, and an example argument, which actually I can't remember what that does, but we didn't use it. So that's false. And then you can see the bit that we care about, the .content part. That's just the text that's interesting. And it's telling us, oh, a large language model is like a super smart computer program that can understand and generate human language, etc., etc. I think that's pretty accurate. And I do like that it's explaining it in simple language for me. All right, so that's brilliant. We've sent a message, we've got a response back. But what you tend to find is that in a lot of cases, you actually want to have a longer conversation with GPT. So you're going to have a series of question and answers going backwards and forwards. So you need to be able to remember what GPT said in order to continue the conversation. All right, so next thing, we are going to append that response and new message to previous messages, and we're going to assign it to a new variable. So I'm going to copy and paste the name of the variable. And we're going to we're going to start with the previous messages, which were called, what they called? Messages, what is LLM? And then we're going to use the Python plus operator to concatenate the list. So if you want to combine the contents of 2 lists into a longer list, you can just use plus in Python, which I find very convenient. So we're going to append 2 different messages. Oh, so we want, so we've got this, and then we want the response, which was in, what was the variable called? Response, what is LLM? And then we're going to have a new human message. And the content of this is contained in the instructions. I'm just going to say, why might that be useful? So what you'll notice here is that on its own, why might that be useful? Very ambiguous question. But because we have the context from the previous conversation, the previous messages, that GPT will know that we're talking about large language models. So what this effectively works out is why might large language models be useful? And you wouldn't be able to do that, have that simpler message, why might that be useful, unless you had that context of the previous messages. So you can see why being able to remember what happened before in the conversation is quite useful. All right, so again, we're going to pass our message to GPT. So this is the variable we're going to call the result. So I'm just copying and pasting that. And again, we just call chat and pass in this new variable. So this is what you'll notice is as the conversation gets longer, in this case, you've got to pass an increasingly large number of messages. And if the conversation gets very long, you need to figure out a way to deal with that. But for now, we're just having a relatively short conversation, so we can pass everything in. And then we're going to print the response's content. So we're going to take this variable, this is a response, and we can get the content. That. All right. And if we have a look at the output, you can see GPT's correctly understood that we were talking about large language models being useful, and it's given us some pretty sensible output. Ooh, I like that learning and education is one of the big use cases for GPT and large language models. That is very true. Certainly found them to be very helpful here at DataCamp. All right, so moving on to the next task. We are doing something completely different. So we're ignoring that previous conversation. What we're going to do now is transcribe some audio. So if you go to Files, you'll notice that the workspace includes an MP3 file. So this file is, it's a section from an episode of Data Framed. So that's our podcast, as Reese mentioned. So I was interviewing Logan Kilpatrick, who works at OpenAI, and he was talking, one of the sections within this podcast episode, he was talking about plugins for ChatGPT. So we've got a 6-minute segment of Data Framed, and we're going to get the transcript of that. Now, in this case, I decided not to use LangChain. I had to play around with using LangChain for this. I feel like the interface is a lot more complicated than just calling the Whisper AI directly. So in that case, I was like, you know what, let's not bother with it. There's no point in using something that's going to make the code more complicated rather than less complicated. So we're just doing raw OpenAI code here. And so the other thing to note, when you access a file in Python, it has a slightly sort of weird syntax using something called file handles. In the hint section, if you expand that, I've sort of explained a bit more about what's going on there. But rather than just passing the path to a file, you actually have to open the file and then get the file handle, and then you're passing that file handle to the API. We do cover this in the importing data in Python course in a bit more depth if that's something you're interested in. But anyway, actually, I'll leave this open because the syntax is slightly more complicated here. So the first thing we have to do is open the file. So we're saying with open, and then inside open, we're going to pass the file name. So if I click on files, and go to the ... to the right of the MP3 file and copy path the clipboard, I can just paste that in there. And that wants to be in quotes because it's a path. So the next thing is that we have to specify how we want to open it. And we want to read the file, so we use R. And also Open needs to know whether is this a binary file or is it a text file. In this case, it's a binary file. It's going to say read binary. So open RB. And then we need to give a variable name for the file handle. And I think the service should call it audio file. There we go. I've got some colons. You've got a colon. And then next line. So now we actually do the meat of this, which is calling the API. So we're going to say OpenAI.audio. We use the tab auto completion there. And then we're going to use the transcribe method. And this takes a few arguments. So first thing is that we need to pass in the audio file. The second thing, we need to name the model, which in this case is Whisper-1. And then there are a few things you can do to make your life easier. So normally that's all you need, the file and the model. But we can also specify the response format because the API is quite clever. Rather than just passing or just returning text, you can also get it to return a JSON object, which is useful if you're doing software development. And you can also get it to generate it in one of two subtitle formats. So if you want, if for example, I was creating subtitles for the podcast, then I would select one of the subtitle formats here. In this case, we just want the text to work with. And then one other thing, we are going to specify that the language used in the podcast is English. Now, this is optional, and it will the API will correctly guess that it's English, but you get slightly better performance. So first of all, transcription accuracy is improved, and the speed of generating the output is also improved if you specify the language up front. So we've got this code. One last thing to do is assign this to a variable. So I'm going to assign it to transcribe. And then at the end, we're going to print. I'm not going to assign it to transcribe. This is why I prefer to copy and paste the variable name, so I always forget what I was doing. We're going to assign it to transcript, and then we're going to print the transcript at the end. So let's run this. I'm just going to close the file browser down. So this is something that happens occasionally, is you won't successfully get a connection to the API. In that case, what you can do is just run this cell again, and you can see this time it's going, it should work. If we were being really clever about our code, we could wrap this this call to the API in a try block. So if it didn't work the first time, you could ask it to retry and do it again until it got it right. Okay, so here we have the transcript. Let's jump you back to the top of the workspace. Where were we? Here. So this is the transcript. You can see we've got, we spoke quite a lot in 6 minutes. So this has both my voice and Logan's voice mixed together. There are probably ways of dealing with that, but for now, we'll just have all the text together as one. That's fine for our purposes. The transcript is mostly pretty good, but one thing you might notice is that it says ChatGPT rather than ChatGPT. Now, Logan, I think he's from Chicago, and so in a that from that part of the word, like a Chicagoan accent, B and P sound quite similar, and so the transcription has not worked correctly. So we're going to have to do something to clean this up. And so one thing we can do, rather than having to manually fix this ourselves, we're going to use GPT to correctly spell its own name. So editing transcripts is just a very tedious task, and I do like that you can use AI in order to solve this problem. So we're going to do as we did before. We're going to create a list of messages, pass them to GPT, and then get the content. So we're assigned to messages clean transcript, and we want we want a list of messages, so square brackets. And we're going to start off with a system message, so how we want GPT to role play. And for the content, we're going to say, you're a copywriter, so hopefully it knows it's thinking about spelling and grammar. And then the human message, the content for this is going to be this. So there's quite a lot here. So I'm going to copy and paste it all, and I'll talk you through what it involves. So we're using f-string here. So f-strings in Python let you include variables within your string. So we're asking it to fix the spelling mistakes. The thing that we spotted that was wrong was saying ChatGPT instead of ChatGPT. So we're going to tell it to be very careful about this name so it knows what it's looking for. And then we are pasting in the transcript variable. That's the thing we just created in the last task. And we put that in curly braces in order to paste the variable into the f-string. All right, so this is just as this is everything we need. So it's pretty similar to the code you've written already. So next thing we're going to do is get the variable for the response. So response clean transcript, and we're going to call chat again, and we're going to pass in these messages. And we're going to extract the contents again. We're going to assign to something called clean transcript. So we're going to get the response variable, again, copying and pasting, and do dot content. And then let's print this cleaned transcript. Go. And let's run all of this.
I'm just going to jump in, Richie, and highlight a couple of questions that we've got from the audience so far. So the first one that we got should be a pretty simple one. It's from someone on YouTube, and we've got how do I get files into the DataCamp workspace files section?
Okay, so on the left-hand side, if you click Files, open the file browser, there's a plus button at the top right corner of that. So if you click plus, it'll let you upload. You can also drag and drop into this pane here, or in fact, browse files. So one thing to note, if you're on a DataCamp corporate account, so one that you've got with your company, then we have a few companies have special security requirements. So they've turned off this file upload feature. If you're on a personal account, you can upload files wherever. And a lot of the company accounts, they do allow file uploading. It just depends on the security requirements at your company. But in general, yeah, it's files and then the plus, or use this drag and drop feature.
Perfect.
Do we have any more questions before I move on?
We've got one more question from Alex. Oh, here we go. So can you distinguish between two or more voices?
Can you distinguish between the two voices? Yes, you can, but I'm not sure what the best way to do that is. I must confess, I'm pretty new to this. There's nothing built into the API. I think there must be a way of doing it, but I'm not quite sure. You might have to have actually, if I'm honest, I don't think I can give a sensible answer for what the best way of doing this is. So there should be a way to do it, but I'm not sure exactly what the best way is.
Okay, keep your eyes
Sorry,
peeled
that's
for
not a great answer.
Cool. Okay, brilliant. If anyone else has got any questions, let us know in the chat in the comments, and we will wrap up the rest towards the end.
All right, super. Okay, so we've run this code again, and then you can, if you have a look at the transcript, you can now see that ChatGPT is spelt correctly. All right, so the next task, I'm going to make you do this because it's very similar to the code that you've written already. So one thing that's very useful is having an executive summary of any content. So, I mean, as I love reading, but sometimes, you've got a lot to read. In this case, there's 6 minutes of of speech, and no one has time to read 6 minutes of speech. So GPT is good at creating summaries. So you've got the system message and the human message provided. So you can do the same thing, create a list of messages, pass to GPT, extract the contents, and print the result. So I'm going to use an online timer here. You've got 2 minutes to play around with this, then I'll show you the solution.
Might be worth jumping into another one of these questions while we've got people who are coding along. So we've had this one from Kadas. I have a very basic question. How is this different than having a conversation with ChatGPT manually? What's the purpose of doing this with an API?
Yeah, so it really comes into, do you want to connect GPT or Whisper or whatever with something else? So, for example, if, well, actually, let me show you a DataCamp workspace again. So if we add a new cell, you can see if we can do an AI cell. So this is actually powered by GPT. So you can say, I don't know, write some Python code to I don't know, draw a bar plot. So that's a really rubbish prompt because it's just sort of having to invent some data. But the point is, in Workspace, we use GPT via the API because we want to embed it in another product. So we couldn't embed all of ChatGPT within the product. We just want to connect GPT to another bit of software. In this case, DataCamp Workspace. So from a software developer point of view, you want the API rather than ChatGPT. Secondly, for like from a data analysis point of view, you might want to combine working with GPT with some other data science code. You might want to combine it with Pandas or any of your plotting libraries, Matplotlib in this case, maybe something better, Seaborn or Plotly Express or something. So because you are doing some of your work with GPT, but the rest of it is going to be other Python code, you don't want to be having to copy and paste between the web interface of ChatGPT and then the rest of your Python code. You want it all to be together in one place. All right, I'm just going to delete that cell. Okay, so do we have any more questions before we move on? I think we're at time now.
Yeah, I think that's us, yeah.
All right, super. Okay, so let's go through this next step. So hopefully you've managed to complete it. A few of those slides. So we've got we're going to assign the results to message summarize transcript. We're going to make a list again, so square brackets. So system message, system, and content is going to be your helpful secretary. So in this case, there's a little trick here. If you don't want much output provided, then you can say, please write tersely, or use some other way of saying, don't write very much at all. And that's going to limit the amount of output, give you, which is cheaper because, you pay for the amount of text that GPT is processing. So you save a bit of money, but also in this case, it means there's a bit less to read. And so next, we're going to have a human message. Content is here. I'm going to copy and paste again. So we've used this F string trick again. So we've got a sort of high-level command, which is creating an executive summary of the transcript. Some line breaks in that. That's what the \n is. So it's basically starting a new paragraph. And then we're passing in that clean transcript variable that we created before. And again, passing messages to GPT just means calling chat. I love that it's so easy just to call it. It's like, one little function, pass in your messages, and then we're going to get the responses. Contents. And those want to be assigned to summarized transcript, and then we're going to print out. All right, so let's run that, see what it gets. Okay, so here we see much shorter output, and it's covered all the sort of the key points, I think. All right, so we're going to do one last thing, and it's going to be your turn again because it's pretty much exactly the same code as before. Before we get to that, I just want to talk about some techniques for dealing with Q&A. So we're going to create a sort of, it's almost like a component of a chatbot. The idea is that rather than just providing a summary, you can also ask questions about the transcript. So this is basically how chatbots work: is you ask a question and the chatbot reads from some documentation and provides a response. Now in LangChain, they suggest like 4 different sort of techniques for Q&A. So if you're doing something big and sophisticated, you might need one of the fancier options. Like if you're doing something that needs to work with all the documents from a support site, like if you're trying to answer questions about like your product or whatever, or your service. In this case, we just got one document and it's fairly short. So there are only sort of 2 options that we need. So we don't need to mess about with any vector databases. We have 2 options for this simplest case. The first thing is that we could just put the whole transcript into the question prompt. That's going into our human message. And because this contains all the information, it means that there are more possible questions that we could ask and have answered, but having more text is going to mean a slower response. The second option is to pass in the summary transcript, so that summary we just created, and that means that we can only answer questions about those key points that were generated in the summary, but because there's less text, we're going to get a faster response. It's pretty 50-50 on which one you want to use. I think since we've already created that summary, we're going to use the second technique. So we're going to pass in the summary transcript and get a response. Excuse me. So again, you've got 2 minutes, and you're going to go through and have a go at that task. Reese, are there any more questions that I can go through while people are working?
Yes, we do. We've got we've actually got 2. So the first one is from Mohammed. He said the API you used is different from the OpenAI .chat completion.create. When do we use one or the other?
Yep. So the code I used here is LangChain code, and it is calling OpenAI.chat.create underneath. I just find LangChain, the interface is just a little bit cleaner code. It's a little bit nicer to use. It is by no means compulsory, and I did sort of mention when you might want to use LangChain at the start of this. So if we go back to the beginning of the notebook, there is something about, oh yeah. So here's why we're using LangChain instead of just the OpenAI directly. So yeah, as I mentioned, there are two real reasons. Sometimes the code's a little bit nicer to write, so a bit less typing, and it's a bit easier to understand. And secondly, LangChain code makes it a bit more portable. So if you want to swap out which AI you're using, so if you want to change your code from using GPT to using a different large language model, then it's going to be much easier to do rather than having to change your like all your OpenAI calls everywhere. All right. 10 seconds or so left. So we'll maybe do more questions afterwards. I'll go through this last task, and then we'll finish up with more questions.
Cool. As a reminder, everyone, if you've got any questions, then please let us know in the chat in the comments, and I will save them for the end.
All right. Super. Where are we? So task 6. So in this case, you're going to ask a question. So I didn't specify a question here. I was leaving it to you, but I'm going to ask. Oh, what should I ask? Maybe what plugins are available already? For chat. And create a list of messages. Again, we want to list. We start, as ever, with a system message. So in this case, I decided GPT was going to be a customer support specialist, because this is a little bit like answering questions on a support site. And we're going to have a human message. And in this case, apologies. This should have been spread over several lines. So when you use triple quotes in Python, it means you've got a multi-line string. So I was intending for this to be over several lines, just so it's a little bit easier to read. All right. So there we go. So you can see we've got a high-level question, which is saying use the transcript to answer the question. We're passing in our question, and we're passing in our transcript. All right. So again, passing the message to GPT exactly the same as we've done before. So it's called chat, and then we pass in our message, and then we print the contents. And this. Okay. Oh, sorry. I should have put .content there. You can see the content in this answer portion. All right. So Transcript doesn't mention specific plugins that are available, but I suppose technically it's been a bit pedantic there that they weren't technically available when we recorded this. It was saying that some of the things that were coming soon were Expedia and Airbnb plugins, which in fact are mentioned there. So it's given us a correct answer, which I'm pretty happy with. I am leaving you with a bit of homework, though, so you can carry on without me. So in this case, the question I asked, this was something that I knew the answer was available in the transcript. So what I'd like you to do is experiment with asking a question that is completely unrelated to the transcript, and have a look at the answer and see, is it a good answer or not? You might get a good answer, you might not. If you don't get a good answer, then I would say try and play around with changing the prompt, see if you can improve the result. So this is, and then check that your prompt actually still works with the initial questions, you still get a good answer. And this is essentially prompt engineering. It's changing your prompt in order to try and improve the quality of the responses, because you have to be able to deal with these edge cases where people start asking questions about things that are completely unrelated. So that's your homework. If you want to learn more about this topic, please do have a look at the Working with the OpenAI API course. And we do have a cheat sheet on the OpenAI API as well. All right. So with that, that's the end of the tutorial. Let's go to the final Q&A. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, so I think we've actually done a pretty good job of answering questions as we go. There's one extra question that we've got from Alex Rahord. Nice to see you again, Alex. Based on your experience, which is the best app to convert into text into voice?
I think you might have answered your own question on that. Yeah, so the 11 Labs service is probably that. I'm not sure whether it's the market leader, but certainly the most popular service for going in the other direction from transcribing. So you start with the text and then you generate voice. That's the one I've heard mentioned most. There are a lot. We've got a cheat sheet on the generative AI landscape, and I made this, and I can't remember all the names of the different companies that are on there. I know there were. Reese,
I can help you out and put it on screen.
Link.
We can't really make it out, but what I have done is I've shared it in the chat as well. So I've got it in a separate tab.
So we've got have a look in the audio applications, and it's too small to see.
Yeah, so text to speech.
People with better vision than I have, if you have a look at the text to speech, and there are a few options there. I don't know which one's going to give you the best quality. It might depend on what sort of voice you want to generate.
Yeah. Brilliant. I can also share it on screen, but there's a few options: Add Aris, Listener, Lovo, Voicera, Speechify, Voicemaker. There's, I don't know, 15 or so in that cheat sheet that I've shared in the chat. So yeah, go and check that out. And we'll also put it with the recording as well when we send that out. As far as questions though, I think we're all good. So yeah, unless anyone's got any final questions to come in, I believe that's us wrapping up. Outside of that, I think we just need to remind people of the events we've got coming up.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, we've got several webinars coming up. So tomorrow we've got a webinar with Martina. So she's talking about exploratory data analysis in spreadsheets. So that's a good sort of fairly intro level session for you. Please do come along tomorrow. On Thursday, we've got a SQL for absolute beginner. Oh, sorry. Next Tuesday, we've got SQL for absolute beginners. And then next Friday, so in a week's time, we've got getting started with data viz in Power BI. So we've got 3 fairly sort of intro level code longs coming up. Please do join us for those. Oh, and next Wednesday, there's also a session on driving data and AI literacy with DataCamp. So if you're interested in DataCamp for your business, then please do come along to that. All right. Excellent. Thank you, Reese, for moderating. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you all again soon in future webinars. All right.